My name is Catherine Ashford, and I have lived more lies than truths. I have been 5 different women, spoken in 4 different accents, killed 3 men with my own hands, and loved only one person with my entire soul. That person was my enemy. That person destroyed me. That person gave me the only thing in this world worth living for. This is the story of how I became a ghost, how I fell in love with a shadow, and how we created life in a world built on death and deception. I was born in London in 1918, the daughter of a diplomat and a French mother who died when I was 7. My father raised me between embassies, moving from Paris to Berlin to Vienna, teaching me languages the way other fathers taught their daughters to sew. By the time I was 16, I spoke English, French, German, and Italian fluently, could mimic regional dialects with perfect precision, and had learned that the world was far more complicated than the map suggested. People were not simply British or French or German. They were layers of loyalty, self-interest, fear, and desire. And understanding those layers was the key to understanding everything. When the war began in 1939, I was 21 and working as a translator at the Foreign Office. It was tedious work, translating correspondence and diplomatic cables, but it kept me close to information, close to power. I thought I would spend the war behind a desk, contributing in small, safe ways. Then my father was killed in the Blitz in 1940, a direct hit on his flat in Kensington. They found his body 3 days later, identified only by his signet ring. Something broke in me that day, or perhaps something that had always been dormant finally woke up. I went to the War Office and volunteered for Special Operations Executive, the organization Churchill had created to set Europe ablaze through sabotage, subversion, and espionage. They told me women weren't used for field operations. I told them I spoke 4 languages, could pass for French in any region of the country, and had nothing left to lose. They told me to come back in a week. The training was brutal. 6 months in the Scottish Highlands, learning to shoot, to fight, to kill silently and efficiently. Learning to create false identities so convincing that I could fool my own mother if she was still alive. Learning to lie without hesitation, to betray without remorse, to survive by any means necessary. They broke us down to nothing and rebuilt us as weapons. Some candidates couldn't handle it, broke under the pressure, washed out. I thrived. For the first time since my father's death, I felt alive. I had purpose. I had direction. I had rage, and they were teaching me how to weaponize it. In March 1943, I was given my first mission. The French resistance network in Lyon had been compromised by the Gestapo. Dozens of operatives arrested, tortured, executed. FSOE needed someone to infiltrate what remained of the network, assess its viability, and either rebuild it or shut it down completely. I would be inserted by parachute drop, carrying false identity papers identifying me as Marie Dubois, a widow from Marseille whose husband had died fighting with the Free French. My cover story was simple, believable, and gave me a reason to move around without suspicion. They gave me a cyanide pill to carry in a false tooth. If I was captured, if torture became unbearable, I could bite down and be dead in 30 seconds. They told me it was painless. I didn't believe them, but I took it anyway. Better a painful death of my own choosing than whatever the Gestapo would do to me. I parachuted into France on a moonless night in April 1943. The drop was clean, the reception committee waiting exactly where they should be. 2 men, faces hidden in darkness, who whisked me away to a safe house in the countryside and left me with instructions to wait. Someone would contact me within 48 hours. Until then, stay inside, stay quiet, and trust no one. I spent those 2 days memorizing every detail of my cover story, rehearsing answers to questions the Gestapo might ask, preparing myself for the reality that I might not survive this mission. SOE had told us the average life expectancy of an agent in occupied France was 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I had just turned 25. I might not see 26. The contact came on the 3rd day. A knock on the door, 3 quick raps followed by 2 slow ones. The code. I opened the door to find a man in his early 30s, dark hair, sharp features, eyes that missed nothing. He didn't introduce himself, didn't offer a name. He simply said in French that I should follow him, bring nothing, and ask no questions. I obeyed. He led me through back streets and alleyways, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every escape route, every hiding place. We entered a building through a basement entrance, descended into what looked like old wine cellars, and emerged into a room where a dozen people sat around a table covered with maps and documents. They stopped talking when we entered. Every eye turned to me. The man who had brought me finally spoke. His name was Julian Moreau, and he was the leader of this resistance cell. The others around the table were his lieutenants, his most trusted operatives. They had survived the Gestapo's purge through luck and caution, but they were decimated, desperate, and deeply suspicious of outsiders, especially outsiders who arrived with London's blessing. Julian questioned me for 3 hours. Every detail of my cover story, every aspect of my training, every reason I had for volunteering. He was methodical, relentless, probing for inconsistencies or lies. I answered everything calmly, matching his intensity without showing fear. I understood what he was doing. He had lost people, probably friends, to German infiltrators and collaborators. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Finally, he seemed satisfied. Or at least, satisfied enough to give me a chance. He told me about the network, about what they had been doing before the purge and what they hoped to rebuild. Sabotage operations against railway lines and communication infrastructure, intelligence gathering on German troop movements, helping downed Allied pilots escape to Spain. It was dangerous work with almost no resources and constant threat of betrayal. But it was necessary. It mattered. I told him I was ready. He smiled for the first time, a brief sardonic expression that didn't reach his eyes, and said that everyone thought they were ready until the reality hit them. We would see if I was different. Over the following weeks, I proved myself. Small tasks at first, delivering messages, observing German patrol patterns, acting as lookout during supply drops. I was careful, methodical, never taking unnecessary risks. Julian watched me constantly, assessing, judging. I could feel his suspicion beginning to soften into something like respect. I also found myself watching him. Julian Moreau was unlike anyone I had met before. He moved through the world with absolute certainty, making decisions that could cost lives without hesitation or doubt. He was charismatic, inspiring fierce loyalty from his people. But there was also a darkness in him, a hardness that came from seeing too much, losing too much. He rarely spoke about his past, but I learned fragments from others. He had been a professor at the Sorbonne before the war, teaching philosophy. His wife and daughter had been killed in the initial German invasion, caught in a bombing raid while trying to flee Paris. He had nothing left but the resistance, no life beyond the fight. I understood that darkness. I carried my own. Perhaps that's why we gravitated toward each other. Two people hollowed out by loss, finding temporary refuge in shared purpose. The shift from colleagues to something more happened gradually, so gradually that I didn't recognize it until it was too late. Conversations that lasted longer than necessary, glances that held a moment too long, the way he would position himself near me during operations, as if unconsciously placing himself between me and danger. The way my heart would accelerate when he entered a room. I knew it was dangerous. I knew falling for someone on a mission violated every principle of operational security. I knew that emotional attachments created vulnerabilities that could get us both killed. But knowing something intellectually and being able to control your heart are two very different things. The first time we kissed was in July, after a successful sabotage operation on a German ammunition depot. We had watched it burn from a hillside 2 miles away, secondary explosions lighting up the night sky like fireworks. The adrenaline, the triumph, the shared relief of survival, it all combusted into something I couldn't control, or perhaps didn't want to control. He pulled me close in the darkness, his hands framing my face, and kissed me with a desperation that matched my own. It wasn't gentle or romantic. It was raw need, two people clinging to each other in a world trying to tear them apart. When we finally broke apart, breathing hard, he whispered that this was insane, that we were both insane. I agreed. Then I kissed him again. We became lovers that summer, stealing moments whenever we could, knowing each time might be our last. We made love in safe houses and abandoned buildings, In forests and cellars, always listening for footsteps, always ready to run. There was no future in what we had, no possibility of normal life. We existed in an eternal present, living for moments of connection between operations that could kill us. I told myself it didn't compromise the mission. I told myself I could separate Catherine Ashford, the spy, from Marie Dubois, the woman in love. I told myself a lot of lies that summer. Julian never asked about my past, never pressed for details beyond my cover story. I thought it was discretion, an understanding that everyone in the resistance carried secrets. Now I wonder if it was something else. If he avoided my past because he didn't want me asking about his. In August, we received intelligence about a high-level German officer scheduled to travel through Lyon. Standartenführer Ernst Richter, a brutal Gestapo commander responsible for countless arrests and executions. London wanted him eliminated. It would be a major blow to German intelligence operations in the region and a powerful symbolic victory for the resistance. Julian planned the operation with characteristic precision. We would ambush Richter's convoy on a rural road, using explosives to disable the vehicles and shooters positioned in the trees to eliminate any survivors. It was risky, requiring split-second timing and absolute coordination, but Julian was confident. He had planned dozens of successful operations. This would be no different. The night before the operation, Julian and I lay together in a safe house attic, listening to rain drum on the roof. He was quieter than usual, distant. I asked what was wrong. He said nothing, just that he had a bad feeling about this operation. Too many variables, too much that could go wrong. I told him we could call it off, that no operation was worth his life. He smiled sadly and said that everything was worth his life if it meant defeating the Germans. He had nothing else. Nothing except, he added quietly, me. He told me that night that he loved me. It was the first time either of us had said it, had given voice to what we both felt. I should have been happy. Instead, I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. Because love made you vulnerable. Love gave you something to lose. And in our world, having something to lose was the most dangerous thing possible. I told him I loved him too. It was true. But it was also the beginning of the end. The ambush went perfectly. Too perfectly. Richter's convoy appeared exactly on schedule, moving at exactly the expected speed. The explosives detonated precisely as planned, flipping the lead vehicle and blocking the road. Our shooters opened fire, eliminating the guards with practiced efficiency. Within 3 minutes it was over. Richter was dead along with his entire escort. We had suffered no casualties, a perfect operation, except it wasn't. Because as we were leaving the ambush site, as Julian was organizing the withdrawal, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. One of the German bodies was wearing a radio operator's insignia, and his radio was active, transmitter light still glowing. He had sent a signal before dying, which meant the Germans knew exactly where we were. I grabbed Julian, told him we needed to move immediately, that we'd been compromised. He reacted instantly, shouting orders, getting everyone moving. We ran through the forest, abandoning protocol, abandoning stealth, just running. Behind us, I could hear vehicles, dogs, voices shouting in German. They were close, too close. We scattered, breaking into pairs as planned for exactly this scenario. Julian and I ran together, crashing through underbrush, lungs burning, legs screaming. We could hear the dogs getting closer. They would catch us within minutes. We needed a miracle. The miracle came in the form of an abandoned farmhouse, half collapsed but with a cellar that looked like it might hide us. We climbed down, pulled debris over the entrance, and huddled in the darkness, trying to control our breathing, trying to silence our racing hearts. Above us, we heard soldiers searching the farm, dogs barking, voices shouting orders. They were thorough, checking everything. It was only a matter of time before they found the cellar. Then, inexplicably, they moved on. The voices faded. The dogs grew distant, the sounds of the search disappeared. We waited hours in that cellar, not daring to move, not daring to believe we had survived. Finally, as dawn light filtered through the debris, Julian whispered that we should move, get back to Lyon, regroup with whoever else had survived. We emerged from the cellar cautiously, ready to run. The farmyard was empty. No soldiers, no dogs, no vehicles. Just morning mist and silence. It felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. But we had no choice. We had to move. We made it back to Lyon by midday, using back roads and avoiding checkpoints. The safe house we returned to was empty except for Pierre, one of Julian's oldest friends and most trusted lieutenants. He looked relieved to see us, said most of the others had made it back as well. The Germans had been searching for hours but found nothing. We'd gotten lucky. Except it wasn't luck. I knew it wasn't luck, but I couldn't articulate why. Couldn't quite put my finger on what was bothering me. Over the following days, something began to nag at me. Small inconsistencies, tiny details that didn't quite add up. How the Germans had known the exact route Richter would take, a route that was supposed to be secret. How they had responded so quickly to the ambush, almost as if they had been waiting nearby. How they had failed to find us in the cellar, despite searching so thoroughly. And there was something else, something I noticed about Julian. He had started disappearing for hours at a time, offering vague explanations about meeting contacts or arranging supply drops. His behavior had changed subtly, a new tension in his shoulders, a guardedness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I told myself I was being paranoid. The stress of the mission, the constant danger, was making me see patterns that didn't exist. Julian loved me. He had risked everything for the resistance. He was one of the good ones. But I was a spy. Paranoia was part of my training. And my training told me that something was very, very wrong. I began investigating quietly, carefully, using my access to the network to check details, to verify stories, to look for inconsistencies. What I found terrified me. The safe house where we'd hidden during the ambush wasn't abandoned. It belonged to a French collaborator who worked for the Gestapo. The route Richter took through Lyon had been changed at the last minute, information that should have been impossible for us to know. And 3 previous resistance operations that Julian had planned had all ended with mysterious narrow escapes, operations where the Germans seemed to know exactly where to look but somehow never quite found us. The pattern was unmistakable once I saw it. Someone was feeding information to the Germans, someone high up in our network, someone with access to operational details and London communications, someone who had been protecting certain members of the group, including himself and me, while allowing others to be captured or killed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Julian was a German agent. He had been working for them the entire time, probably since before I arrived. He was running the resistance cell as a controlled operation, feeding the Germans intelligence, while maintaining enough successful operations to avoid suspicion. He was the reason the network had been compromised in the first place. He was responsible for every arrest, every execution, every betrayal. And I had fallen in love with him. I should have reported immediately to London. I should have arranged for Julian's elimination and gotten myself extracted. But I couldn't, because I didn't have proof, just suspicions and patterns. And because despite everything, despite the horror of what I suspected, I couldn't quite believe it. The man I loved, the man I had risked everything for, couldn't be a traitor. It wasn't possible. I needed proof. I needed to be certain before I destroyed him. I began watching Julian the way he had once watched me, looking for evidence, looking for mistakes. And I found them. Small things at first. A meeting he claimed to have with a contact that never happened. A supply drop he said was cancelled, that I knew had gone through. Conversations he ended abruptly when I entered the room. Then, in September, I followed him. He left the safe house late one night, telling me he needed to check on something, that he'd be back in a few hours. I waited 5 minutes and followed, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice, close enough that I wouldn't lose him. He went to a cafe in the German Quarter, a place where French civilians never went unless they were collaborators or prostitutes. I watched from across the street as he entered, as he sat down at a table with a German officer in civilian clothes. They talked for an hour, Julian passing papers across the table, the German taking notes. Then Julian left, walking past me without seeing me, heading back toward the safe house. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to put my gun against his head and pull the trigger. But I did none of those things, because I had just discovered something even more terrifying than Julian's betrayal. I was pregnant. I had suspected for a few weeks, had been trying to deny it, to pretend the symptoms were just stress and poor nutrition. But I couldn't deny it anymore. I was carrying Julian's child. I was carrying the child of a German agent, a traitor. a man responsible for the deaths of dozens of resistance fighters. The irony was almost unbearable. I had come to France to fight the Germans, to avenge my father's death, to strike back against evil. Instead, I had fallen in love with the enemy and was now carrying his child. I was the worst kind of fool. I should have contacted London immediately, reported everything, requested extraction. But I hesitated, because if I reported Julian, if I revealed he was a German agent, I would also have to explain how I had failed to detect it, how I had compromised myself by becoming involved with him. My career would be over, my reputation destroyed. And what would happen to the child? But more than that, more than my career or reputation or even the child, I hesitated because of one simple, terrible truth. I still loved him. Despite everything I knew, despite every rational reason to hate him, my traitorous heart still belonged to Julian Moreau, or whoever he really was. I decided to confront him. It was a mistake. I knew it was a mistake, even as I made the decision. But I couldn't help myself. I needed to hear it from his lips. I needed to understand why. I waited until we were alone in the safe house, until the middle of the night, when no one else would interrupt. I told him I needed to talk, that it was important. He smiled, pulled me close, kissed my forehead, asked what was troubling me. So casual, so loving, so convincing in his deception. I asked him about the cafe, about the German officer, about the papers he had passed across the table. The change in him was instantaneous. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by something cold and calculating. His body tensed, ready for violence. For a long moment we simply stared at each other, both of us understanding that everything had changed, that we could never go back. Then he laughed. It was a bitter, humorless sound, full of resignation and something like relief. He said he had wondered when I would figure it out, had actually been impressed it took me this long. I was supposed to be one of London's best, after all. I asked him why. Why betray his country? Why work for the Germans? Why let innocent people die? He said it wasn't betrayal, not in the way I thought. He wasn't French. His name wasn't really Julian Moreau. He was Hans Richter, a German intelligence officer who had been inserted into the French resistance in 1942, building his cover, establishing his legend, becoming exactly what the resistance needed him to be. Everything had been a lie. His dead wife and daughter, his past as a philosophy professor, his burning desire for revenge against the Germans, all of it fiction, carefully constructed to make him sympathetic, to make him trustworthy. He had played the role so perfectly that even experienced resistance leaders had believed him, had given him authority, had allowed him to shape their operations. And I had been his greatest success. London's spy sent to assess the network had instead fallen in love with him, had compromised herself so completely that she was now useless to British intelligence. He had neutralized me without ever raising suspicion. It was, he said with that same bitter smile, the operation he was most proud of. I asked if anything had been real. The love, the connection, the moments we shared, had any of it meant anything to him? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said that falling in love with me had been the one thing he hadn't planned, the one variable he couldn't control. It had started as seduction, as manipulation, as part of his cover, but somewhere along the way, it had become real. He loved me. He genuinely loved me. And that love had made him reckless, had made him protect me when he should have let me be caught with the others, had made him vulnerable in ways that could destroy everything he had built. He said he knew I was pregnant. He had known for weeks, had been trying to figure out what to do. Because if Berlin found out, if his superiors discovered he had gotten a British agent pregnant, he would be executed. But he couldn't bring himself to eliminate me, couldn't bear the thought of harming me or the child. He asked what I was going to do. Would I report him to London? Would I try to kill him? Would I run? I told him I didn't know. I truly didn't. My training said one thing, my heart said another, and my mind was screaming at both of them to shut up and let me think. He said we could run, both of us. We could leave France, disappear into neutral territory, raise our child away from the war. Switzerland, perhaps, or Spain. We had skills, resources, contacts. We could make it work. I asked how we could possibly trust each other. He had lied about everything. I was a British agent. We were enemies. He said we weren't enemies. We had never been enemies. We were just two people caught in a war neither of us had started, forced into roles we hadn't chosen, trying to survive in a world gone mad. The British and Germans who sent us into this hell, they were the real enemies. We were just pawns. It was a seductive argument, and I wanted desperately to believe it. I wanted to believe that we could simply walk away, that love could be enough, that our child could grow up in peace. But I knew it was fantasy. There was no walking away from what we were, what we had done, what we knew. I told him I needed time to think. He nodded, said he understood. Then he did something that surprised me. He gave me a gun, his own service pistol, and said that if I decided to kill him, he wouldn't stop me. He deserved it. He had betrayed his country, betrayed the resistance, betrayed me. If this was how it ended, he would accept it. I took the gun, felt its weight in my hand. It would be so easy. One shot. Justice for every person he had betrayed. But I couldn't do it. God help me, I couldn't pull the trigger. Over the following days, we existed in a strange limbo. We continued the pretense of normal operations, continued our roles, but everything between us had changed. We barely spoke. We didn't touch. We moved around each other like ghosts, both waiting for the other to make a decision that would determine both our fates. I tried to contact London, to send a coded message explaining the situation, but I kept stopping myself, kept deleting the messages before sending them, because reporting Julian meant condemning him to death and condemning myself to living with his murder. It meant our child would grow up knowing their father had been a traitor and their mother had killed him. Julian, for his part, didn't contact the Germans. He could have turned me in at any time, could have had me arrested and probably earned a commendation, but he didn't. He was waiting, just as I was, for one of us to find the courage to do what needed to be done. The decision was taken out of our hands in October. The Gestapo raided the safe house, acting on information from an informant we hadn't suspected. They came at dawn, dozens of them, surrounding the building before we even knew they were there. Julian and I were in separate rooms when it happened. I heard the shouts, the breaking glass, the gunfire. I grabbed my gun and ran for the back exit, the escape route we had all memorized. I saw Julian in the hallway. Our eyes met for just a moment, and in that moment I saw everything. Regret, love, resignation, and something like relief. Then he turned and ran toward the front of the building, drawing fire away from me, giving me time to escape. I ran. I climbed out a window, dropped into an alley, and ran through the streets of Lyon like a hunted animal. Behind me I could hear gunfire, screams, the sounds of people dying. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, until I collapsed in a doorway miles from the safe house, gasping and crying and alive. I learned later that the Gestapo had killed 3 resistance members in the raid and captured 4 others, including Pierre. Julian Moreau had been among the dead, shot multiple times while providing covering fire for the others to escape. He had died a hero, they said. He had saved lives with his sacrifice. I knew the truth was more complicated. He had died protecting me, protecting our child, protecting the woman who had discovered his secret and could have destroyed everything. He had chosen, in his final moments, to be the man he had pretended to be, rather than the agent he actually was. I made it back to Britain through a covert extraction network, claiming I had barely escaped the raid, that I needed to report on the network's collapse. I told London that Julian Moreau had been a true hero, that the network had been compromised by an informant we never identified, that I recommended the surviving members for commendations. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? I was one of their best agents. I never told them the truth. I never revealed that Julian was a German agent, that I had compromised myself, that I had failed in every possible way. I kept his secret, protected his reputation, allowed him to be remembered as a hero rather than the traitor he actually was. It was the only gift I could give him, the only way to honor what we had shared, even if that sharing had been built on lies. I gave birth to our son in March 1944 in a private hospital in Scotland, where SOE sent agents who needed to disappear for a while. I named him Thomas Julian Ashford, Thomas for my father, Julian for his. I would tell him, when he was old enough, that his father had died fighting the Germans in France. It was true in a way. All the lies I told about Julian were true in some way. I never returned to field operations. I couldn't. The pregnancy had been my excuse, but the truth was, I had lost my faith in the mission, in the clear division between right and wrong, good and evil, us and them. I had learned that the world was far more complicated than I wanted to believe, that good people could do terrible things and terrible people could do good things, and that sometimes love was not enough to redeem either. I spent the rest of the war working intelligence analysis in London, pushing papers, reading reports, contributing to the war effort in small, safe ways. I watched the Allies march across Europe, watched the camps be liberated, watched the full horror of what we had been fighting against be revealed. And I thought about Julian, about the man who had worked for that system, who had enabled that evil, even if indirectly. I thought about how he had claimed to love me while serving the regime that would have murdered me and our child if they had known what I was. But I also thought about his final choice, his decision to sacrifice himself to save me. I thought about the complexity of a man who could be both monster and hero, traitor and lover, enemy and father. I thought about how war reduces us all to impossible choices, and how we live with those choices afterward. Thomas grew up knowing nothing of this complexity. I raised him to believe in simple truths, that his father had been brave, that the war had been necessary, that good had triumphed over evil. I gave him the fairy tale version of history, the one that lets children sleep at night. Maybe when he's older, if I find the courage, I'll tell him the truth, that his father was a German spy, that his mother fell in love with the enemy, that he was born from betrayal and deception, and a love that should never have existed. Or maybe I'll take the truth to my grave and let him keep his illusions. God knows the world will shatter them soon enough without my help. After the war, I tried to find out what happened to Hans Richter, the man I knew as Julian Moreau. I used every contact, every resource I had access to. I learned that he had been born in Hamburg in 1911, that he had joined German intelligence in 1938, that he had been inserted into France in 1942 under deep cover. I learned that his real wife and daughter were alive and living in Berlin, that he had written to them regularly throughout his time in France, that they had no idea what he really did. I learned that he had been awarded medals by both the Germans for his intelligence work and posthumously by the French resistance for his sacrifice. He was a hero to two sides of a war, honored by people who would have executed him if they knew the truth. The irony would have amused him, I think. I also learned something else, something that haunted me for years. In the final months before his death, Julian had been secretly feeding information to the Allies, passing intelligence about German operations to resistance networks he claimed to be infiltrating. He had been playing both sides, trying to engineer a German defeat while maintaining his cover. Whether he did this because he genuinely wanted Germany to lose, or because he was trying to protect me and ensure the Allies won so I would be safe, I'll never know. Perhaps he didn't know himself. Perhaps by the end he was as confused about his loyalties as I was about mine. I never married. How could I? What man would want a woman carrying this burden, these secrets, this impossible history? I had occasional relationships, brief affairs that never developed into anything meaningful. I told myself I was protecting them, that they deserved someone whole rather than someone shattered by the war. But the truth was simpler. I had already loved the one person I could never have, and everyone else was just a poor substitute. Thomas is 45 now. He's a history professor at Cambridge, specializing in World War II resistance movements. He teaches his students about the brave men and women who fought the Germans in occupied France, about heroes like Julian Moreau who gave their lives for freedom. He's written papers about the resistance, given lectures, appeared on television documentaries. He has devoted his life to honoring the memory of a father he never met, a father he believes was a hero. I attend his lectures sometimes, sitting in the back, listening to him describe Julian's operations, his leadership, his sacrifice. I listen to my son honor the man who betrayed everything I believed in, and I feel my heart break all over again. Because he's not entirely wrong. Julian was those things. He was also something else entirely. He was both and neither, and the truth is too complicated for a university lecture. I'm 76 years old now. My time is running short. Soon I'll face whatever judgment awaits beyond this life, and I'll have to answer for my choices, for loving a traitor, for protecting his memory, for lying to my son for his entire life, for all the people who might have lived if I had reported Julian earlier, if I had put duty above love. I don't know what I'll say in my defense. I don't know if love is justification enough for betrayal, if the heart's truth matters more than the mission's requirements. I don't know if choosing life, mine, Julian's, Thomas's, over duty makes me hero or villain. What I do know is this: war is not a story with clear heroes and villains. It is not a tale where the good are purely good and the evil purely evil. War is moral chaos, a place where every choice is wrong in some way, where survival requires compromises that haunt you forever, where the person you love might be the person you should kill, and those truths have to coexist in your heart until they tear you apart. Julian Moreau was a German spy who infiltrated the French resistance and caused the deaths of dozens of people. Hans Richter was a man who fell in love with his enemy and died protecting her. Both statements are true. Both will always be true, and I will carry them both to my grave, along with the child we made, the life we created from espionage and betrayal and impossible love. This is my story. This is my confession. This is the burden I pass on to anyone who reads these words, especially to my son if he ever finds this after I'm gone. Thomas, if you're reading this, know that I loved you more than life itself. Know that your father, despite everything, loved you too in his own complicated way. Know that you were born from something that shouldn't have been possible, something that violated every rule and principle, but something that was nonetheless real. And know that the war never ended. Not for me. Not for any of us who lived through those impossible choices. We just learned to carry the weight until it crushed us. My name is Catherine Ashford. I was a British spy who fell in love with a German agent. I betrayed my country for love. I protected a traitor's memory. I built my son's life on a foundation of lies. Whether that makes me a romantic or a traitor, a victim or a villain, I leave for others to judge. But I will say this: if I could go back, if I could make different choices, I don't know that I would. Because those choices gave me Thomas. Those choices gave me moments of genuine love in a world burning with hate. Those choices made me human rather than simply a weapon. And maybe in the end, that's all any of us can hope for. To remain human despite the inhumanity surrounding us. To love despite the cost. To survive not just physically but emotionally, spiritually, with some small piece of ourselves intact. Julian once told me, in one of our last conversations, that he believed love was the only truth that mattered in a world of lies. I disagreed then. I told him duty mattered, that honor mattered, that choosing the right side in a war mattered. He smiled sadly and said that I would understand someday, when everything else had burned away and only love remained. I understand now. Too late, as always, but I understand. Love was the only truth we had. Everything else, the missions, the loyalties, the sides we chose, was theater, performance, a story we told ourselves to make the killing bearable. But love, even impossible love, even love that destroyed us, was real. I loved Julian Moreau. I loved Hans Richter. I loved the man who was both and neither, the enemy who was my home, the traitor who saved me. And I will love him until the moment I die, carrying his memory like a scar that never healed, beautiful and terrible and entirely mine. May God forgive me, and may God forgive him, and may God somehow forgive us all for the things we did in the name of love and war and survival. This is my truth. This is my burden. This is the spy who loved me, and whom I loved and who we destroyed each other to protect. The end.